Imagine a world stripped of all artificial political authority. Hobbes presents the state of nature as a logical, mathematical deduction of human interaction, in the absence of governance, distinct from a specific historical epoch. At this baseline, every individual possesses the right of nature, the absolute, unrestricted liberty to use their own power to preserve their own life. The crisis begins with a critical caveat. In this state, each individual acts as the sole, independent judge of what constitutes a valid threat to their survival. This creates a condition of chaos fueled by an epistemological void. It has nothing to do with inherent human evil or universal greed. Without a shared, trusted third-party arbiter, objective truth regarding safety cannot exist. If you cannot know your neighbor's mind, trust becomes a physical impossibility. In a system devoid of objective reality, the only mathematically rational strategy for survival is preemptive violence. Hobbes saw this mathematical reality play out during the fracturing of the English Civil War. The war erased the shared national arbiter of truth and law, plunging the country back into a state where every faction acted as its own judge. This collapse culminated in 1649, with the public execution of the sovereign outside Whitehall. This execution signaled the return to a fragmented reality. Without a central power, factions were forced to violently enforce their own subjective judgments against one another. Hobbes noted that while humans differ in strength, we are equal in our vulnerability. Even the strongest individual must sleep, and even the weakest can kill a giant through coordination or stealth. In a state of continuous fear, the achievements of civilization, industry, agriculture, and science become physically impossible to sustain. Justice also vanishes. Where there is no common law, there is no concept of right and wrong, only the immediate requirements of power. The Hobbesian war of all against all is the inevitable physics of a system lacking a unified, absolute judge. Hobbes sought a solution by discarding the traditions of scholastic theology and divine right. He turned instead to a radical, mechanistic methodology. Hobbes treated political philosophy as a science, utilizing deductive logic found in geometry and physics. He viewed human beings as biological machines, literally matter in motion. In this model, the human machine is driven by physical forces, the pull of appetite and the push of aversion. The fear of violent death acts as the ultimate physical aversion, repelling nodes away from conflict and toward security. From this, Hobbes derived his laws of nature. These are logical, geometric theorems of self-preservation, not moral commands from a deity. The first law of nature creates a rational imperative to seek peace, while simultaneously permitting every advantage of war if peace is unattainable. Escaping the state of nature requires engineering a mechanism that alters the physical incentives of the human machine. This leads to the second law of nature, the realization that peace is only possible if every individual mutually surrenders their right to independent judgment. This surrender is codified in a covenant, a mutual contract where individuals transfer their rights to a single artificial entity. This contract is horizontal, made among the masses themselves, rather than a vertical negotiation between a people and a pre-existing ruler. However, a contract based purely on verbal trust will collapse under the weight of immediate self-interest. As Hobbes argued, covenants without the sword are but words. The agreement requires an overwhelming enforcement mechanism to guarantee compliance. The masses must actively create an entity so utterly terrifying that breaking the contract becomes a mathematically irrational choice. By fusing their collective power, they create a force that overrides the localized physics of fear. This artificial, monolithic entity is the Commonwealth, known as the Leviathan. The social contract functions as a mechanical necessity designed to override the physics of violent death. For this mechanism to hold, the sovereign authority must be absolute, undivided, and unlimited. This frontispiece to the 1651 edition shows the sovereign as a giant constructed from the very bodies of the people who authorized it. The torso is composed of hundreds of individual citizens facing inward, representing their total physical fusion into a single political body. In the right hand, the sovereign holds a sword, representing the state's monopoly on physical force and secular law. In the left hand is the crozier, representing a monopoly over religious doctrine and the definition of moral truth. This control over the crozier is a physical necessity. If a citizen believes their duty to God overrides their duty to the state, they have two masters. Two masters create two judges, and two judges return the state to a war of all against all. This requirement challenges the modern instinct to separate power through legislative and executive checks. Hobbes argued that dividing power creates institutional disputes over final judgment. If the sword and the law are held in different hands, they will eventually turn against each other. This was the architectural failure of the English Civil War, where the king and parliament became rival judges, effectively dissolving the Commonwealth. For Hobbes, any division of power is a blueprint for collapse. The final logic of this system rests on the legal concept of authorization. By entering the covenant, every subject legally owns all actions taken by the sovereign. This means the sovereign cannot logically commit an injustice against you. Because you authorized its power, to protest the sovereign's actions is to protest your own will. This creates an inherently oppressive, dictatorial Leviathan that is structurally immune to accountability. Hobbes forces us to weigh the burden of a monolithic dictator against the localized terror of subjective, neighbor-to-neighbor violence. If we choose to reject the weight of the sovereign, we will ultimately return to the epistemological void. We are left with a choice between the predictable, unified weight of the Leviathan and the unpredictable, fragmented reality of the state of nature. Humanity faces a stark binary: submit entirely to the absolute weight of the sovereign, or return to the void of the dagger in the fog.